Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. We've got the usual crew here today to talk about the past week in the legislature here in Lansing. We've got Deena Bosworth, Samantha Gibson, Madeline Fata, and myself, Stephan Currie. So today we'll kind of get right into it. First off, pretty big hearing last week as far as governor's initiatives go. Had a hearing on solar siting. So Madeline, you want to kick us off on how that hearing went, what we're hearing and that sort of stuff?
Yes. So the governor has some clean energy goals. Legislation was officially introduced on Tuesday in the House that would grant all siting and permitting authority for solar and wind projects to the Public Service Commission. It would preempt all local control, all local ordinances, everything. So we've been working behind the scenes. We've been opposed, but having ongoing conversations with the bill sponsor. The hearing, we were set to testify in the hearing, but it was a packed room with an overflow room. They took up a full hour and a half, so they did not get to us. It's our understanding committee will also be held this week, and the bills will be voted out of the House Energy Committee this week and be sent to the floor. But we've also been told that the version that comes out of committee this week will not be the final version. They'll continue to work on it on the floor and possibly over in the Senate chamber. So we've proposed language along the way that would protect the 20 counties in Michigan who currently have renewable energy ordinances in place. It would protect the work they've done and hopefully grant an opportunity to the other 63 counties to develop their own ordinances. And only if a county opts out would the responsibility then fall to the PSC.
Now, this is not ideal, right? I mean, we're opposed to any kind of preemption. I mean, that's our first, sort of line of defense on that. But I mean, Madeline, how many times have we been told this is going to happen? We are preempting locals. We have the votes. It's a governor priority. It's a speaker priority. The Senate is already going to hold a hearing this week on it too?
Yep. So the Senate introduced identical bills. They're going to have a hearing, I believe, on Thursday of this week. And that's just to kind of get the ball rolling on their side so that when the House bill comes over, it can basically skip the Senate committee process and go straight to the floor, I think is the intention with those bills.
Well, I mean, luckily we have the 5-day rule, but yeah. It's a little frustrating that they want to preempt locals on it. What's the current megawatt threshold for preempting? How big are we talking?
It's very confusing because the bills it's a 4-bill package, and one of the bills in the package says all projects over 100 megawatts, and another bill in the package is specifically for projects that are 50 to 100. So I think that bill might not be the one that gets the PA, and I think it'll just be all projects 50 megawatts and up. I think that's what we believe the final product will look like.
But it's not soup yet, so we don't really know.
Well, and they, especially when we're starting to hear even a potential shorter legislative session that could end as early as the 26th, potentially as late as the 7th, 8th, it's not a lot of time. That's 6 voting days if you look at the 26th. And you mentioned the 5-day rule where a bill has to sit in, once it's flips chambers, it's got to sit in the other chamber for 5 days before any action. Now that's days, not business days, but 5 days. So that could play a role as well. So obviously something we'll keep folks updated on in the next week. But moving along, Sam, let's talk a little bit about, we've been talking about J&J bills a lot. It's been in our legislative updates. It's been on our podcast. Let's kind of continue that path. Let's talk more about J&J and where we're at with the advancement of those bills.
Yes, more on JJ. So last week, the Senate voted out about half of the package. They voted out 11 bills. The House was supposed to do the remaining bills in the package last week. They didn't get around to it. So the expectation is this week, the House will vote out those bills on the floor. Of course, they'll eventually flip chambers and eventually go to the governor's desk. So still anticipating those being PAs by the time they adjourn. But Steve, as you mentioned, I mean, with the 5-day rule and potentially the 26th, it's cutting really close on those being done by November. Now, last week, the House did floor amendments, as did the Senate, to put delayed effective dates on these to October 1 of 2024. So regardless of if they're signed in November, it's not going to take effect for another year. So I think maybe they're looking at less of a sense of urgency now that they've put these timelines in. But I do anticipate a vote in the House this week regardless.
So the bills will switch over, but like Madeline said, there's like the House and Senate solar bills are the same. Are the House and Senate JJ bills the same?
Yes, so there's double sets, so the exact same bills in both chamber. I think some senators want their bills to get signed, some House members are going to have theirs signed. So I think that they've come to agreements on who will get what, and then those bills were passed out accordingly.
Got it. So then they can, even if they want, they could, if they wanted to, do what they're talking about on solar, maybe not even have to mess around with having a committee hearing, because they've already heard all the testimony and all the bills. Correct. They're all familiar with it. They know what they're voting on. So still a chance maybe to get it done before they break.
Yeah, I don't foresee any additional committee hearings. A month or so ago, they did joint testimony with House and Senate criminal justice and judiciary anyways. So I think regardless, they would have skipped additional committee hearings.
Well, that's some good news to see that continue to move down this path. And I know something that's you've been working on a lot lately and throughout the year. So good news on that. And then Deena, PPT, another bill package. I guess it's just a bill that has been hanging out there since I think 2021 really was when that original agreement was made, and still having a hard time living up to agreements made back then apparently. But you want to talk a little bit about that PPT reimbursement bill?
Absolutely. Yeah, Steve, you're right. I don't know how many times we go into, a legislator's office and they say, don't worry, we'll fix it later. Don't worry, we'll fix it later. Okay, it's 2 years later and we're finally now just starting to get it done. So it is 3 bills, 4553, 4554, and Senate Bill 331. And what those bills do is they carve out a part of the use tax and put it into a local government reimbursement fund. What that's meant to do is to reimburse local units for their losses associated with that 2021 expansion of the personal property tax exemption. I'd love saying that because it sounds so confusing. But basically they said, businesses, if you have any $80,000 to $180,000 in equipment, then you don't have to pay taxes on that anymore. It used to be if you had up to $80,000 in equipment, you didn't have to pay taxes. So they gave them that extra tax break, but again, the legislature was giving away local revenue. So we kind of fought about that for quite a long time. Had a commitment that they would reimburse us. We just had to figure out how to do it. And now that's reflected in those 3 bills. And luckily, those 3 bills are now on their way to the governor. I mean, the Senate has to concur in one of them, but they're all done. They're ready to go. We expect the governor to sign them. She set the $75 million aside this year so that the money's there for the reimbursement.
Well, that's great news. That's, 75 million statewide that's been hanging out there that we've been waiting to get this fixed, and finally gotten it done. We constantly fight those preemption bills, so it's nice to get a little backfill on one of those.
That's it.
Anything else that I'm missing as we move through this legislative session, girls?
I mean, we still have a lot we want to accomplish before they break, but not a lot of news to report yet. We're still kind of fighting the good fight. And hopefully we will. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly the revenue sharing trust fund is the first priority to try and get that through the process, but I don't think the administration's too keen on it, so still trying to fight that uphill battle.
Well, of course, we've got some, we're coming 2 weeks off our MAC annual conference, and I know we had some videoed sessions on there that are going to be available online soon. In addition to that, we have our policy summit coming up December 7th here in Lansing. That's kind of a one-day educational session where we have 4 breakouts, kind of a mini conference day. We'll have the ability to participate remotely. It won't be an interactive participation. You'll be able to watch kind of the presentations if you prefer to participate that way. Or of course, registration will be sent out if you do want to come to Lansing and participate in person. That of course will be an available option, and that'll be December 7th, and that'll be in East Lansing at the Kellogg Center. So be on the lookout for that registration. With that, I don't think we have any other updates. We look forward to talking to you in the next week. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.